Welcome to Grain Rainbows, the podcast community for people coming out LGBT plus later in life. I'm your host, Dr. Ginger Campbell. My guest today is listener Midge Noble. Midge has graciously volunteered to share her story, and I think it's a great follow-up to episode 19 with Anne-Marie Zanzel, where we talked about the challenges of finding and accepting faith community. I know that many of you will resonate with Midge's story, and I think it contains something for everyone. I'll be back after the interview to share a few brief thoughts. As always, you can get complete show notes and links on our website, grainrainbows.com. You can send me feedback at grainrainbows@gmail.com or voice feedback at speakpipe.com/Doc Artemis. Midge Noble, thanks so much for being brave and coming on Grain Rainbows to share your story today.
Well, you are so welcome, and I thank you very much for having me because I love your show, and you have such an elite group of people, and I'm very honored to be a part of that. So thank you so much.
So would you like to start out by just telling us a little bit about who you are and maybe share your story?
I would love to. So I grew up in Hickory, North Carolina, and back in the day, it was a very small town. I was raised by a mom and a dad, and my grandfather was a minister, and my uncle was a minister. And so we had what was called Pawpaw Sundays. And what that meant was that that's the day we prayed before we ate, and that's the day that we didn't have our music on, and we didn't do any kind of dancing because he was super strict. The rest of the days we were able to kind of relax and we did our thing, but it was definitely a religious-based upbringing where we did it Pawpaw's way, even though he did not live in our home. We would go to his church when he preached close by, and if we were never at church, we would get a phone call, and Pawpaw would say, "Who died?" So it was expected to always be there. So that kind of framed my consciousness as to how things were supposed to be. So growing up, I really just thought I had a pretty normal life. We were poor. We didn't do much. We went to school. We came home, and that's pretty much what we did. Mama lived at home and worked at home. And we were just, for me, I was a pretty run-of-the-mill family. Growing up, though, I started realizing that I wasn't like all the other girls. Like everybody was like having puberty happening. And even though my puberty was really late, and that's a whole nother, that would be a medical story, but my puberty was really late. So I thought that's why I didn't really feel the same way the other girls did, because they would goo and gaw over all these guys. And I was like, nothing. I got nothing. But I had a very close friend that was a girl that, you know, we would have sleepovers, and I was all about Lisa. And then when we weren't friends anymore, I was more devastated than I've ever been in my whole entire life. So all through elementary school and even through high school, my mom would ask me this question: "Are you gay?" And I'm like, "No," because I just had this knowing that in my family that had to be the answer. I'm like, no. And she's like, "Well, your relationship with Lisa seems a little sick." And that's the only word she could come up with. So I kept getting these messages that even though I didn't fit in, I definitely didn't need to admit that. And so I just kept trying to pass and and pretend that I thought that these guys were, you know, really cool looking. It just never worked out. But because of that religious stigmatism, and even in our youth group, we were taught one time, we had a specific lesson about homosexuality. And in that youth group, they said homosexuality is like having sex with animals. And I thought, oh, okay, I can't be that. And so I just put it out of my head. And it wasn't until I was 30 years old that I was able to admit it to myself. And that's only because all through college, I had a really close friend. And then, yeah, it was like I always had this one person, and they were like everything about it, you know, and I just, you know, but I never put any kind of name to it. Even dated a guy really seriously in college. And he even took me to his little town and showed me his mama, and we stayed at her house, and he showed us the property where we were going to build a home, and we talked about being married. And the whole time I was like feeling kind of queasy inside, but I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then one day he just broke up with me and it was over. later, many years later, we find each other on Facebook. And he said, I always knew I was gay. I knew you didn't know that you were gay, but I thought you might be. And I didn't want to break your heart by marrying you and then having to leave you. And I didn't know how to tell you. so that was a weird story. But then later, when I went to graduate school, I met her, and I just could not be with this woman. We just fit so well. And even though she was in a relationship that was ending, we spent all of our time together. So, and at the time I was living with my preacher uncle, who smelled beer on my breath one day after having dinner at Sue's house. And he said I needed to move out because he would not have any drug addicts in his house. So I moved out and in with Sue because her relationship had ended. And I never named it. I knew she was gay, but I could never name it for me. And we graduated from graduate school, went in 2 different towns, but she had a dog named Sheba, and I had gotten a dog named Danny in graduate school, and they were so bonded. They were such a bonded pair. And when we graduated and she went her way and I went my way, our dogs got into massive depression. It was just sad. I mean, I know how that sounds, but
I don't mean to laugh
but you're a dog person, so you get this. So Sheba would go under the bed and not come out. Danny, my retriever, she was a golden retriever, and she would not play. Oh, she was a lab. My golden died last year, but she was a lab, and she would not go out and play. She wouldn't go to the ball. But when we get together on the weekends, they would play, and they were all about it. And then when we'd get ready to leave, they were depressed. So my job there in Elkin City lasted a couple of years, and I needed to leave that job. And I called Sue and I told her I'm going to have to go home and live with my parents. And she's like, "Oh no, it's not going to happen. You're going to come to Asheboro. You're going to live here." And I said, "But I don't have a job." She said, "You'll find a job." So I thought, well, it'll be good for the dogs, right? It's going to be good for the dogs. So moved to Asheboro, of course, found a job. And then we just continued to be together, tried to pray the gay away because that's what I was taught. And finally, she wound up really clinically depressed. And so she went into therapy. And she came home one day and she said, "Midge," she said, "I just need to be really honest." And she said that we've tried to pray the gay away, and either it's not supposed to work or it didn't work, but I'm gay. I'm in love with you, and I can't live with you and be feeling this way. And this terror just ran through my soul. And I said, "I need the name of your therapist." And she's like, "Why?" And I said, "Because what you said just scared me to death, and I've got to figure out why." And so I went into therapy, and she went to Washington State and interviewed for a job near where her grandparents lived. And one day she called and she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm tearing the wallpaper off the bathroom wall." And she said, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Midge, we rent that house. We don't have permission to take the wallpaper off." And I was fighting so hard inside to not admit what was going on. And I saw this little thing and I just started peeling it. And it was like, and I said, "Well, it's not going to go back on." I said, "This is really old paper." And she said, "Well, we'll square it with the landlord." And I said, "So how'd your job interview go?" And she said, "Really well." She said, "They want to hire me." And I'm like, "Oh," being the supportive friend, "that's great. And I know you'll love it out there. And that'll be really, really great." And she said, "Yeah, it will." And so I clarified her time when she was going to fly back in. She came back and I said, "So when do you move?" And she said, I decided to turn it down." And I'm like, "Why?" And she said, "Well, it just didn't feel like the right time." And I'm like, "Okay." And later, she told me that when she called and I was taking the wallpaper off the wall, she knew that I was close and she didn't want to be in Washington when it happened. She wanted So I'd stayed in therapy, and in therapy, the counselor gave me the name of a minister at the Metropolitan Community Church that she wanted me to meet. I didn't understand what that was all about, but I said, and my question was, "Well, is it a gay minister?" And she goes, "Well, actually, yes." And I said, "Well, of course they're going to say that being gay is okay if they're a gay minister." And she said, "Well, Midge, when you first came into me, you said that if you realized that you were gay, you were going to have to kill yourself. And I said, yes. And she said, do you remember why you said that? I said I would kill myself because in the Bible it says that I'm going to hell, so I don't see why I would wait around. I might as well just go. And I said, I also told you that I didn't know if I was gay yet, so you couldn't commit me because I'm not suicidal yet. And she, I don't like working with therapists. But so, she said, I just want you to try to look at the spiritual aspect of it. And I think that Christine can give you some information. So that's when I kind of started to figure out that there's a religious side and a religious viewpoint. And then there's a spiritual side of us that's deeper than dogma. And so I met with Christine and I brought out all my little fundamentalist questions and she answered all of them. Like, do you read the Bible? And with all these things. And she just asked me to come to church. And I did that for several times. And then one night, and I also took a class by her called The Homosexuality in the Bible. And she looked at all of the scriptures that are usually used to condemn us. She unpacked it and she showed time it was written, who wrote it, how women were treated, and how to sort of like look at it from a different perspective. And so that one night I was sitting in the back pew and they started to sing It As Well With My Soul. I don't know if you know that song, but it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just started crying and I couldn't stop crying. And I knew then that it had all come full circle and that my journey ended in the fact that my truth is that I'm gay. And what I was going to do with that, I didn't know at that moment, but that's when I knew for sure.
Well, I am just so grateful that you volunteered to share this story. I think it's a wonderful follow-up to Anne-Marie's recent interview, and just fantastic. And I appreciate you. So tell me what happened next.
Well, what happened next is that Christine, the minister, also knew that my struggle was real and that I really didn't know what to do with this new information. And she also knew that I had considered suicide if I was gay. And so after church, and she had seen me crying so much, she just asked me to hang out. So I hung out for a few minutes and she came to me and she said, so looks like it was pretty emotional for you tonight. And I said, yes. And she said, so what's going on? And I said, well, if it's well with my soul, then I said, I think I figured out that I am gay. And she said, wow, okay. Now what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And she said, well, I think the next thing you're going to do is you're going to come to the K&W and eat with us. And I said, no, I don't feel like being around people. I just need to go. And she says, but yet you're not going to just go. She said, you're going to call whoever might be expecting you to come home. And you're going to tell that person that loves you that you're going to stay and hang with us for a little bit and that you'll talk to them when you get home. That's what I did. I went out and hung at the K&W, and she just wanted to give me a chance to just let this all rest a little bit. And she didn't want to send me off in my little swirly head, not knowing, really what was going to happen. And so I did. I called Sue and she said, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm pretty okay. And she said, are we going to talk when you get home? And I said, yeah, we're going to have to talk when I get home. And she said, okay. And so then before I left the K&W, Christine said, now you're going to call Sue back. And I said, she's sleeping. She said, I bet she's not. She said, you're going to call Sue back. And you're going to tell her that you're on your way and she's going to be expecting you. And you don't want to disappoint or hurt her, do you? And I said, no. And she said, so you'll get there okay and you'll get there safely, won't you? I'm like, yes, I will. So it was that moment where I knew it. I didn't know what to do with it, but I was so supported and so surrounded by people who were there to just hold space for me.
I'm going to break in here for just a minute to remind you that I need your help to reach new listeners. Besides telling others about the show, reviews in iTunes are very powerful. If you send a screenshot of your review to grainrainbows@gmail.com, I'll send you an Amazon gift card. You can also support the show financially via Patreon or Venmo. I'll tell you more about these at the end of the show.
That's what's so important to me now is we are struggling so much today and in this society with the upheaval of what's going to come next and what new law are they going to put in, or what are they going to take away? And I just want to be there to hold space and give people that safety net so that they don't have to then end it early until the final chapter. And I've talked to lots of kids in my practice about that. What do you do with most books? And they said, what books? And I said, any book you read. I said, do you stop it in the middle of the book? Because no, I just keep going through the chapters to get to the end. I said, exactly. I said, well, guess what? You're not at the end of the book. You're not at the end of the chapters, and you just have to keep turning the pages and see where this leads you. If people could have told me stuff like that instead of what's going to happen if I was gay, which, by the way, is not true. Anybody listening, that's not true, that gay people automatically have sex with animals. So I just want to hold space for people, and I want to give them hope, and I want to give them the understanding that we're all worthy.
Well, you certainly were blessed to have Christine and the person who sent you to Christine.
Yes. And, that journey of doing that and unpacking all those feelings is difficult, but it really is important. So for anyone listening today or whenever they're going to listen, I want them to know that asking for help, being able to get into a counseling or a coaching relationship to figure this out and to work through all the stuff, because then the after effects of coming out to family, to religious families, is so frightening and so dangerous for some people. So being able to know that you have set up a safety plan for yourself and make sure that you do it in the best way. I did not come out to my family face to face. I just didn't feel safe. And so I had to find another way to do it. And I had to make sure that I was taking care of myself in the process.
So did you consider just staying in the closet for your family? Because a lot of people seem to pick that choice.
Well, and I understand that choice. And living in a small town too, I mean, it depends on where you're living. So, I've always told people that there's no right or wrong way for anybody to do it, that you have to follow your heart and what you're wanting in your life. And for me, part of it may be because I'm an Aries and I'm very impulsive. And so when I believe something, when I know something, I usually go all in and I don't want to hold back. But yet at the time, I was a school counselor in a small community and I couldn't be open. Well, I could have, but the people in my county that were open got demoted. And they always found a really good way to do it so that it didn't look like it was homophobic. One of my dear friends, and I was a school counselor for 8 years, but he got demoted. And then he said to me, he goes, Midge, they're looking for us. And I said, who? He said, us. And I'm like, gay people? He goes, yeah. And he says, if you can get out, I'd suggest you get out. That led me to finding a different way to serve. So I think that coming out, I did consider that, and I did do it pretty much when I was a school counselor. And then I worked with hospice, and I was allowed to be a little bit more out and a little bit more vocal in where I worked, but not so much out in the community. At mental health, I was able to be more out, but then taking children in a room and closing a door was also very threatening to me, to think that someone might misconstrue what was happening back there. So, and I believe in family therapy. I think it's more beneficial to have the whole family working together and then knowing what's going on in the session so they can follow up at home. So most of the time I did family therapy in my practice so that it was always clear to everyone what the agenda was and what we were doing and why we were doing it and how you can follow this up at home. But yeah, so I did consider that, but I just have this need to be like as authentic as possible. And for me personally, authenticity meant that I show up who I am, and I want to show up all of me, not the facade of me, because I did that for many years. I put out exactly who you think I am, and I was carrying a piece of me that I couldn't share. My dad even said, I went to a reunion one time after coming out, and telling him was horrible, by the way. We might have to backtrack a little bit. But he said to me after the first reunion, don't go telling any of this stuff that you're thinking. And so I spent the whole reunion acting like I was an adult woman with no life. And so when the next reunion was coming around, I said to him, I said, Daddy, I can't not tell about my life and my girlfriend. And I said, I can't do that. And he says, then you best not come. And so for the next 3 family reunions, Midge didn't attend because I was not allowed to go and not be truthful. And so I chose not to go.
Did he get past that?
It took a long time, and it wasn't really clear. Right before he died, he said he was going to have another reunion. And he said, and you're coming. And I said, Daddy, we talked about this a long time ago. And I said, I'm not coming and pretending that I'm not who I am. And he says, I'm having a reunion before I die, and you're coming, and you're bringing your family. And then he died, and we never had the reunion. But taking it from that, so I do feel like he came to some resolution that he was going to accept it. Way before that, when I came out through a letter, there was like zero communication from my family about it. And my sister was just giving birth, and she had had a horrible pregnancy, lost a lot of blood, and had a kidney failure backup and needed emergency surgery. So I was there. My parents were still at home, and they were going to come down the next day because it was like an hour and a half away from each other. So I called home to let them know that she was in a lot of trouble. And my dad answered the phone, and I said, Daddy, and he hung up on me. I called 3 different times, and he hung up on me because he wouldn't listen to the sound of my voice. The 4th time I called, and he answered the phone. This is before, who's calling, the old rotary thing. So he had to pick up the phone. So he picked up the phone, and he heard my voice, and I just said, I didn't even say Daddy. I said, Debbie's dying. And he handed the phone to my mother. So the first time after coming out through the letter that I saw him was at the hospital, in my sister's hospital room, and I was standing there with her. He walks in, and it's like, oh no. It was just so uncomfortable, and it was really uncomfortable for a long time. He accepted Sue as a person, but if we even brushed shoulders, like if I walked past and brushed her shoulder, he would explode with, don't shove that down my throat. And he was just very difficult. And my brother was fine in the beginning, and then he joined a church. Then it was like, I'm an abomination to his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And my niece I'd had a niece and a nephew that we had a relationship with, and everything was cool for a while. And then he went to this church, and then my new niece was born. She was 2 months old, and I was not allowed to see her for 7 years as he went through all of his homophobic stuff.
Did he ever get past it?
He did get past it. He'll come to my house. He does furniture, and he does market in High Point, close to where I live. And so he has come and stayed the week at our house so that, he can drive into market without doing a hotel. We've been to his home. He hugs me now. But I didn't even know that he was past it because he would never come in on Christmas Day. Whatever day I was coming in to see Mama on Christmas, he would always pick another day. He wouldn't even be there during family things. And so one day, it was snowing really, really hard, and we were trying to get to Mom's house, and we kept talking about, we need to turn around. This is really dangerous. We need to turn around. And we kept calling in and saying, guys, we may not make it. And my sister was really being really demanding and weird. And she kept saying, you will come, you will make it, you will not turn around. And I'm like, chill out. We got to be safe here. And she's, I'm telling you now, you're coming. You better get here. So finally, we just kept pushing through. We finally got there, and I went to open up the door, and it swung open really fast. And there stood my brother. And I went, oh, did you know we were coming today? Because I've been waiting for you. And he was like, he just moved on. And Midge was like, no, wait, we got to explore this. We need to talk about it. Nope. We pretty much never talked about it. He didn't want to go back. I tried a couple of times, not that day, but I tried a couple of times. And he's just like, can't we just leave this where it is? Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
So what happened with your mom?
My mom loves the fence. And so I see your point and I see your point, but she does believe that I'm going to hell, but she'll love me as I go.
Moms just have this special way about them, don't they?
I reckon they do. So she never, she loves Sue. We've done a lot of things for her, and she appreciates everything we do. But the religious part, and I even tried to share, there's a book that was called Is the Homosexual My Neighbor? It did a really good job of unpacking some of those scriptures. And I read it, which gave me some solace. And we talked a lot about it in that one meeting that Christine held. But I tried to get my brother to read it, and he said, that is propaganda. And I said, do y'all at your church have one of those little devotional guides that you read? And he said, well, of course we do. And I said, and you read it? And he said, of course I do. Is it written by God? And he goes, no, you know that. That's written by someone else. And I said, So somebody else has an opinion about the scriptures and you read about it and it's not God. Is that not propaganda? That was a witchy thing that Midge did, but it didn't work and it didn't go over well.
So would you say out of all of this, it sounds like I can see a lot of potential lessons, but what would you, if you were saying to somebody, what's the biggest lesson you learned?
I think the biggest lesson I learned is that we have to be patient with the people that we love, and they may never come around. But when I know something and I know it and I feel great about it, I have to be mindful that other people need a minute. They need a minute to remember that I'm not.
Or a year or two?
Yes. Yeah. Or 7. Yeah. Yeah. Some people are slow. So, yeah, I mean, it takes people their own time frame, and some people are slower at working through stuff. And in our family, with so much of the religious dogma swirling around, that's why it took me so long. I was trying to honor the only faith that I knew, and I was trying to not go to hell. And then it turned into, even if people can't get it, or it takes them a while to get it, I can't waste another minute of my life not standing in my truth and being authentic and feeling good about me. Because I also had to work through the shame and the inner homophobia and the fears of going to hell. I mean, that took years to kind of, even saying the word God for the longest time was just painful because it only brought up condemnation, abomination, going to hell, judgment. And so I found words like creator of all that is or the beloved, and that felt more gentle for me. And that's just how I had to do it. I did a Facebook post one time and I was saying the creator of all, something about the creator of all that is. And my mom comes on the Facebook and posts, why don't you just use the word God? Have you stopped being a Christian? And then my sister pops on and says, yeah, I want to know the answer to that. Minister Uncle pops in. I'm listening. I'm like, really, people? Really? So I just deleted the post. And then I called my mom and I said, so that thing that you did on Facebook got a lot of attention. She said, well, everybody's wondering if you're still a Christian. I said, well, if it's anybody's business, I think it's more my business and creator's business. But, and she said, well, why can't you just answer the question? I said, well, because it was very offensive the way I felt attacked. And I said, here's my question back to you, though. Do you believe that God, as you understand God, created everything that is? And she said, well, of course I do. I said, then why am I wrong at calling him creator of all that is? And there was crickets. Well, I just think it would be easier if you just said God and then everybody would know you're a Christian. And I said, quite frankly, Mama, I don't care what they know and I don't care what they think.
So out of all of this, what's been the biggest surprise?
I think the biggest surprise is that I made it through it, really, because I was so convinced that I would not be able to live past knowing that if it were true. I think the other biggest surprise is how strong I've gotten after being so clear and getting more and more authentic. I get stronger every day. I'm more outspoken. I'm more clear. Even in this little town of Asheboro, North Carolina, and we're quite small, tomorrow is the very first night that a friend of mine and I have organized an LGBTQ meetup in Asheboro for our local groups. And I'm so proud of doing that. And I never would have even considered having that out there. And for a while, my co-leader was nervous about putting the address out there because she didn't want any hate crimes coming to the group. And I was like, well, I said, I understand your fear. I said, let's talk to the person whose building we're going to use. It's actually a Episcopalian father. I always said pastor, so saying father seems weird to me, but he is so amazing and so connected to our community and wants to help. And so he's giving us a space for free. And so I talked to him and he says, you know what? He said, if you hide now, who's going to be able to feel free? It's my church. You do it. You list the address.
Yeah, that's kind of like it was for me for starting this podcast. I actually thought about, the idea came to me before Trump was elected.
Mm-hmm.
Then I kind of chickened out for a couple of years.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. And I'm so proud of you for coming full circle with that, because I love what you do. But it is fearful, isn't it? And I think that's why Sue and I finally got married when we could do it in North Carolina. And then right after that, Trump gets elected and they all start talking about taking marriage rights away. And I'm like, no, dang it. I just got it. Earlier when we talked about just how difficult times are right now, I want more than anything for people to be able to stand up and stand proud and feel it inside first. We have to feel it inside first, and then it just can't help but resonate out.
Yeah. And I mean, the reality is if we don't stand up now, we'll have nobody to blame but ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did a post earlier today about that. Let's see if I can remember what it was, but I just wanted to talk about that whoever we are, that it's not trying to be some kind of like shouting and making it an agenda. It's just that this is who we are. We're wanting people to recognize that we are regular
human beings,
and just, because that was Daddy's thing. It was always like, you're making this such an agenda and you're trying to, push this on people. No, I'm just trying to be me. So it was good though, that toward the end that I think he probably began to embrace it in his own way. So that's the one thing that I'll just take from that, is that after all those many, many, many years, and I mean, it was longer than 7, he finally did come to some sort of resolution.
Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I guess the last thing that I would share is that I want everyone to hear me say that you are absolutely okay. There is nothing about you or who you love that is not okay. I hope that one day, if you're feeling any kind of shame or less than feeling because you're gay, or you're questioning that you're gay, it's really good on the other side of knowing. It's really good on the other side.
Would you mind telling me the name of that book again? And I'll get that from you so I can put it in the show notes, the one you found so helpful.
It's called Is the Homosexual My Neighbor? And I can't remember there were 2 ladies that were the authors of the book, but Is the Homosexual My Neighbor?
Were there any other books that you used that were helpful to you?
No, there were some that were really heavy on the scriptures, but it was just almost above my head. It was hard to read. This was so user friendly, and it was really clear, and it did its job for me.
Well, Midge, it's been so much fun talking with you.
Thank you.
Maybe someday we'll meet face to face.
That would be great. We just
got to get the group built up enough that we could get enough people in one place. Right now, the group's kind of small.
Yeah. Well, small's good too sometimes, Start small, build out.
Thanks again.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
I really enjoyed talking with Midge, and I know each of you got something personal from her story. One thing that stood out for me was the value of patience. This has been a theme for many of my guests, especially when it comes to reconciling with one's family. Another very important point she highlighted was the importance of realizing when you need help, such as therapy, counseling, or coaching. It actually takes a lot of courage to ask for and accept help. Midge shared a couple of resources, including the book, Is the Homosexual My Neighbor? She's also a licensed counselor who has shifted into coaching with a focus on empowering women, especially those in our community. I'm going to include a link to her website in the show notes, but I'm also including a brief conversation with her about her work at the end of this episode. So if you're interested, listen all the way to the very end. I would like to feature more listeners on Graying Rainbows, so please email me at grayingrainbows@gmail.com if you would like to share your story. If the idea frightens you, remember that your story could be a lifeline to someone else. I'm also happy to share anonymous emails for those of you who need extra privacy. Before I close, I want to remind you that your feedback is really important to me. Please write to me at grainrainbows@gmail.com or submit a comment on the website. Another place to share is on our Facebook fan page. If you want to join our private Facebook group, just click on the box that says join the private group. This appears on the right side of the logo on the fan page. Everything that gets posted on the fan page is public, while anything you post in the group can only be seen by other members. When you ask to join the group, be sure to answer at least one of the questions. Again, don't forget to send a screenshot of your iTunes review to grainrainbows@gmail.com so that I can send you an Amazon gift card. Last month, I announced that I'm creating a newsletter so that you can get the show notes automatically. Unfortunately, I'm having a little trouble getting this up and running, so just keep an eye out on the website. I'll post a link when it's working. The other thing I announced last month was Patreon. This is a tool you can use to support the show financially. It allows you to make a monthly pledge of whatever you can afford. Just go to patreon.com/Doc Artemis or look for the link on the website. If you prefer to make a single donation, I recommend using Venmo. This is a mobile app that you can put on your smartphone. One nice thing about Venmo is that if you tie it to your checking account, then whenever you pay someone, they get the entire amount. This compares to services like PayPal that take out small service charges, which really eat up small donations. My username on Venmo is Doc Artemis, DOCARTEMIS. If you're an international listener, let me know. I can send you a link for PayPal. All the donations are going to go directly to the expenses of producing Grain Rainbows. This includes website hosting of audio files, and especially the cost of audio editing. One personal note before I go. This episode is scheduled to be released on June 10th, 2019, which means that by the time it's released, I will have participated in my first Pride Parade in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm actually going to be on the float for the Unitarian Universalist Church of Birmingham. The Unitarian Universalist Church has a long tradition of acceptance, and UUCB hosted this year's interfaith service. Thankfully, in Birmingham, there are at least 12 affirming congregations, including several different Christian denominations and our largest synagogue. I want to encourage you to look for a Pride event near you during the month of June. The next episode of Grain Rainbows will feature Deb Fowler from History Unerased and will include a reflection on the importance of the Stonewall Uprising, which occurred 50 years ago this month. Until then, I hope you will check out my other podcasts, Brain Science and Books and Ideas. Thanks again for listening. Grain Rainbows is copyright Virginia Campbell, MD. You can copy this show to share it with others, but for any other uses or derivatives, please contact me at grainrainbows@gmail.com. For the sake of listeners who might be interested in your work, tell us a little bit about what you do or starting to do now.
Yes, I've just transitioned from being a licensed professional counselor for many, many, many years. And now I'm opening up myself to serve as a coach. My business is called Empowering Awakened Hearts, LLC. And this business was birthed out of a belief that I have, that I believe that we all deserve to be seen, heard, valued, and respected for how we show up in the world, who we love, and how we live our lives. I believe that we deserve to be safe and have equal rights so that we don't lose our homes or our jobs or our lives. And in our world, that is sometimes a consideration. So when I decided to open up this business, I thought about who I would want to empower. And our community, the LGBTQ community, has so much hurt and pain that we've been through. I want to be able to serve, to go through the hurt and get to the healing of all of that pain and clean that out so that we can, as a collective group, be able to transform our pain and claim authentic power. So that's what Empowering Awakened Hearts is all about, is that we do a journey of sitting with the pain and claiming it to some degree, but then being able to transform it. It just resonated with me that women in general, it kind of started out as empowering women, but in the times that we're in now, I continue to know that my journey came so far from being able to feel shame and that I might have to kill myself if I'm gay, to being so authentic and so powerful and feeling so good about myself. And I want to offer that to others.
So it sounds like what you're actually doing is almost a hybrid practice between a pure therapy model and a coaching model. Would that be fair to?
It would be fair. I know that I cannot at this point identify myself as a therapist. And the thing I love about the coaching aspect of this is that it is more powerful, I think, than sitting back and allowing people to take their time to come into their own by asking deep questions, by being able to be really clear with them and guide and cheer them along the way and support them in a more proactive way. That has actually always been my style. I've always felt a little bit bad about how I was a therapist because I wasn't like a Rogerian kind of person. And I was never just one model. I always identified myself as eclectic. I don't channel in the alternative method of channeling, but I think I do get downloads. I believe that my back pocket approach to therapy has always been, it just comes out of me. Like somebody will be saying something and then I'll just come out with something. I had an intern one time and she said to me, I was working with this child that had been sexually abused and she had been avoiding. And then she said, I can't even remember now what she said. And I popped back with a comment and she broke down in tears. And it was the first time she was able to just release it. And we went through the session and it really helped her heal after that it was brilliant. My intern got out her little notebook and flipped the page. She goes, okay, so tell me where you learned how to do that. I said, learn how to do what? And she said, that thing that you just did with that kid, where did you learn to ask that question? I said, I'm going to really disappoint you right now because that was like a back pocket thing. She says, I don't even know what that is. I said, it just came out of me. You didn't learn it anywhere? I said, well, if I did, I don't know where I learned it. It came out of me. And she goes, now how am I supposed to do that? I said, well, you'll just have to find your own way of doing that. But so in coaching, I've always done that. I've always just been really open to being led by my inner knowing. And it has been really effective for, over 30 some years. But now it's going to be a little bit more different.
Okay. Well, I'll be sure to include a link to your website so that anybody that's interested in learning more about that can get in touch with you.
I would love it. Thank you so much.
You are welcome.